March 29th, 2021 Site Plan Review Committee meeting. My name is Commissioner Devanshi Patel. For the safety of our committee members, county staff, and participating community members, we're holding this virtual meeting today. All participants are with us, who are with us are joining us remotely. Thank you for being here this evening. We're legally authorized to hold this virtual meeting based on the governor's executive orders, legislation adopted by the Virginia General Assembly, and the County Board's Continuity of Operations Ordinance adopted in March 2020. Before we begin, I'd like to orient everyone to our new virtual environment. I guess it's not so new anymore, but to our virtual environment, and cover a few specifics about how today's meeting will run. Today's meeting is available to stream from the county website via Microsoft Teams link. There's also a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. If commission members, if planning commission members, presenters, or speakers lose internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For everyone joining us via Teams, please turn your video feed off. I will address when it's appropriate to turn it on in a moment. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that's located on your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. If you are dialing in by phone, please press *6 to unmute. The meeting chat is active for participants who need technical assistance only. The meeting chat should not be used for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony periods. Some additional notes for our commissioners. If a commission member wishes to be recognized to speak on an item, please use the raise hand function. Then when called upon, turn your video feed on and leave your microphone muted. Once you've been recognized, you may unmute. Once you've completed speaking, please turn your video feed back off. After discussion by SPRC members, we will have time for public comment. If you'd like to speak, please post your name in the chat and you'll be added to the public speaker list. You will be called upon to speak at an assigned time. Speakers have 2 minutes to comment. A speaking timer will be displayed on the screen. If you are dialing in by phone and unable to see the screen, we'll provide an audible warning when 30 seconds are remaining. You'll be muted when your time has concluded. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. So I will just briefly provide or orient us to the schedule and the agenda. And then I will introduce Ms. Sontag, Ms. Olivia Sontag, who will start off or kick off the meeting for us. So thank you again for being here. By way of agenda, we will have we will have a presentation from the staff and from the applicant on the update of this project, the Vernon Street Duplex project, SP number 461. And thereafter, we will provide kind of the buckets of information that I think we've identified as potential areas for discussion, and we will open it up for public comment as well. Ms. Sontag?
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So good evening. I'm Olivia Sontag with the Arlington County Planning Division and the project manager for the Vernon Street Duplex project. So I hope everyone had a chance to view the staff presentation and the applicant presentation posted on the project webpage. In an effort to leave as much time as possible for discussion tonight, we post these videos in advance. And I'll still quickly give a brief project overview and cover a few updates, and then the applicant will also give a brief presentation before the SPRC member discussion. So again, as highlighted, these are the agenda topics for the meeting this evening. They'll focus on some of the common topics that were identified in the online engagement session, which was held during the first week of February. And then we'll also have time at the end to discuss some other topics that were not listed on the agenda, including some accessibility and visitability topics that were brought up just today, as well as widening of the sidewalk along Washington Boulevard. So there will be time to discuss that. Sorry, my slides keep jumping around. The first we'll cover some of the building placement and setbacks and the landscape plan and tree preservation, kind of all under the topic of tree preservation on the site. The second or third big item was the reduced parking ratio. And then we'll talk about some of the issues raised by SPRC members on the green home choice and lead for homes, some different green building improvements to the topic. And then just a brief reminder of where we are right now. We did have that community engagement session. We're now at the virtual SPRC meeting, of which there will be one meeting. And then the next step in the process will be the Planning Commission in May and the County Board meeting in May. And with that, I will hand it over to the applicant, who's going to provide a brief update. I believe Matt Allman is with us.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Allman. For those of you who don't know me, I'm land use attorney with the firm of Venable and Tyson's. Thank you for having us this evening. We won't share our full presentation. It's already been posted online, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to view that ahead of the meeting. Just as a quick reminder for those who have been tracking the project, we have made some updates since the online engagement session, and those really focus around tree preservation. We've done a lot of work with staff, shifting the alignment of our driveway and taking on a couple other tweaks to increase the number of existing trees that can be retained. So that's a positive improvement. And we've also had a series of discussions with staff on the green building components of the project. And there are some very interesting and very cool sustainability and green building design elements for this project. So we've continued to refine those details. In terms of the overall mass structure, placement, and use of the building, those have remained the same since our initial filing. But we'll go ahead and throw it back to the chair and just reserve the remainder of the meeting for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to just first start with the Planning Commission members and SPRC members to determine if we have any questions. I think, Ms. Sontag, we had that slide up that talked about the items that we had identified as potential areas for discussion. If we could just bring that slide back up, but in the meantime, I can say we have the building placement and setbacks kind of bucket item for conversation, landscape plan and tree preservation as another, parking and transportation as a third, architecture and materials as the fourth item. And then we did receive some comments immediately before this meeting, which included questions regarding visitability elements that increase the inventory of livable homes that support aging in place and accommodate mobility disability and increase width of the sidewalks. So I don't see, do we have any commission members or SPRC members that would like to address and or have comments regarding the building placement and setbacks? Commissioner Bagley, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I ask a clarifying question first?
Sure, please.
Thank you. So going back to the community engagement, I'm just curious, how do the neighbors in that area know that this project is coming up? Was there, did the applicant notify people? How exactly did that work? I'm just kind of curious. Can anyone comment on that? That was something that I had a question about.
Ms. Sontag?
Yes, this is Olivia. So we do outreach to civic associations throughout this process, and then we'll do another big effort actually in the next couple weeks leading up to the Planning Commission meeting and the County Board meeting, including posting plaques on the site. I think in the past we would do mailings. We're no longer doing that in this virtual environment. But that is the process. And then I believe the applicant did some early outreach months ago, and I believe some continued outreach, but I'll let Matt weigh in on that if you'd like.
Sure. We did send a courtesy copy of our initial filing to the Civic Association and just let them know that the application had been filed. Tony and Mashoud from our applicant team are on the line as well, and I know that they were engaging with the next door neighbors. I don't know what the exact status of those discussions has been lately. I know they were trying to be sensitive with COVID and all about the right way to approach and be respectful of people's personal space and whatnot. So I don't know how that quite shook out, but Tony or Mashoud, if you want to add any flavor to that, please chime in.
Thanks, Matt. I actually, Mash and I, we hand delivered a sealed envelope, a letter in a sealed envelope to the immediate neighbors, just to let them know that the review was taking place.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear that, because as a former Civic Association president, I will just say that you would like to believe that we or civic associations have every living person that's in the civic association as a member, or at least a contact, but that isn't always true. And since I did notice in some of the feedback from the online engagement that there was some concern expressed by neighbors about how maintenance or lack thereof had been at the property for some time, I was just curious as to what the how actually folks were being engaged on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other commission members who have questions, or does anybody have any questions from the SPRC members regarding building placement and setbacks? So the next item is the landscape plan and tree preservation. Any comments from commission members or SPRC members on this particular issue, landscape plan and tree preservation? Commissioner Weir.
Good evening, everyone. So my frustration with this is that very nearly this goes a little bit to building setback and building placement and setbacks, but I think also goes to trees. We have to remember that very nearly this exact same building, could be built by right here, but for the fact that it's bisected by a firewall and has a second range unit in it. That's it. That's the difference. There's a firewall separating the 2-car drive garage in half, and there's a second kitchen, which really only means a second range unit. That's it. So if we want to have rules about where trees go, let's figure out what those rules are, and let's get them in the zoning ordinance, because we shouldn't be. No neighborhood gets to have this kind of a conversation about a McMansion that's getting replaced, that's replacing a tear down. And I don't necessarily think that the solution is to require an SPRC for every replacement, but we need to get past we need to get to the point where we actually itemize some of these concerns in the ZO and treat them consistently, because this is just, that's all. That's what I have to say about the very concept of the discussion.
Thank you. Vice Chair Weir. Any other, Chair Latelmi?
Yes, I want to associate myself with Vice Chairman Weir's comments there. It strikes me that having just having to go through the SBRC process here points out why it is so important for us to have our missing middle exercise going forward now. As he pointed out, a McMansion could have gone up here and none of us would be sitting here tonight. And it would have been one unit, could very well have even been larger than this, and we would not be talking here. We need to be putting in by right rules that would allow more than one unit on lots of this size. And that's not just in this one location. You know, certainly throughout neighborhoods that are, let's say, within a half mile of the metro stations or other robust transit. This just points out why we need to be looking at our procedures and our rules and the missing middle. I'm hoping and expecting that it will address situations like this, that we would not have to be sitting here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Steinberger, you had your hand up.
It was really just to associate myself with the prior comments, and I thought for Commissioner Lentell did such a good job that I would save us a minute and a half of me saying the same thing, but just associating myself with the comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bagley?
Thank you. Since a lot of folks who did have an opportunity, right or wrong, or could this be improved or whatever, did make comments about the trees, I would just like to say that I appreciate the fact that staff went back and that the applicant was willing to take a look at some of the mature trees there. As somebody who lives not too far from there and does not walk on Washington Boulevard because it's too spooky, but it's nice to see that an effort was made to preserve trees, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Weir?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Bagley, for that comment. I was not as articulate on this particular point as I would like to have been, but there is a reason that I said that we should be thinking about what it is that we want generally when it comes to tree preservation. And I think that it's you know, I thank you for speaking up on behalf of the people who did chime in on that in the neighborhood. I think that we do generally need to have some, and I'm sure that someone is going to point out that we do, and I'm just ignorant of it at the moment. But you know, there is an extent to which it goes back to, if this were coming in as a by right tear down rebuild, what incentives in the ZO would the builder have had to get to the same conclusion that we're now looking at in these plans that we have before us, that, you know, that are on the screen right now, and you know, maybe short of a potentially constitutionally questionable set of regulations, maybe nothing, or statutorily in Virginia. I don't know, but maybe there is some kind of an incentive structure that can be generalized back to the single family neighborhoods where we are seeing the canopy loss in the Commonwealth. So I guess two things. I wanted to thank you for speaking up, Commissioner Bagley, on behalf of the people who did go to the point of weighing in on this. But I think that there probably is something to a more generalizable approach to what we see before us in terms of the changes here. Thank you.
Okay. Any other planning commissioners that want to be heard on this particular issue?
Yes, please. Bill Braswell.
Okay, Mr. Braswell.
Having visited this site and serendipitously met one of the developer folks, this gorgeous home was inhabited by some folks serendipitously, and they had to work to throw them out. But more seriously, if you look around this site, you see across Washington Boulevard townhouses. If you see across the street, more townhouses, and then the motel. And yes, up the street, there are some nice houses. We seem in Arlington County to be thinking heavily about duplexes. And this seems to be a very good example of how we can make duplexes work really well for the developer, for the people who buy, and for the surrounding neighborhoods. And I can't think of a reason why we should not applaud what is going on here. But then I don't know everything, of course.
Mr. Roswell, Ms. Carrie Thompson.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to associate myself with Commissioner Bagley's earlier comments. Being one of the persons who did make comments about the trees, I really do appreciate the applicant's efforts to narrow the driveway and preserve some of the most mature trees. So I think that's an improvement. I have to imagine the neighbor to the north will appreciate having those trees there still, because it's a benefit that confers to the neighbor. But this conversation has been illuminating to me, someone who's still a little bit new to the process, that it seems as though we're punishing a small multifamily project proposal because it is a duplex, rather than this could be done and all the trees could be torn down, as I see in my neighborhood, by the big McMansion houses. So I agree. There needs to be a little bit more uniformity of our requirements to the extent it's even possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Weir, okay. You have your hand up, or is that a holdover? Okay.
My apologies. I thought that I had taken it down.
No problem. And Ms. Thompson, I think, okay, perfect. Are there any other comments by the Planning Commission or the SPRC members with regard to landscape tree preservation and even building basement and setbacks? Commissioner Bagley?
Actually, this goes back, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, to, let me just pull this up. Someone just texted this to me and I don't recognize the number, but it's relative to this. So the question was, so are these setbacks by right, at least by zoning would be required, correct? Can you speak to that?
Yes, thank you for the question. They are asking for a zoning ordinance modification for the setback along Washington Boulevard.
Commissioner Weir?
I'm sorry, did I hear that right? Washington Boulevard is the only setback where a variance isn't the right word, is it? Where I guess it is, where they're asking for a reduced setback from the minimums? Washington?
I believe now it's Washington and the eastern lot line, but Matt Allman,
Okay.
Can you confirm that based on their most recent revisions?
Actually, I'd like to defer to Karen and Charles because I know that they were working on the plans most recently.
Yep.
Olivia, I believe you're correct, but I don't want to speak out of turn.
Yep, this is Karen White from Walter Phillips. And so that is correct. We are looking for the Washington Boulevard modifications, obviously. And then so I'm going to say the left side, lot B, that between them and the neighbor, there is a modification there as well, because that's considered the side yard for, sorry, it's considered the rear yard. It's kind of confusing, the way these lots are done here. So there is a modification there, and then there also is a modification along on Vernon Street, just for the porch. Actually, the porch is a modification as well. It's a little bit closer than typically.
So let me ask this question a little bit differently then. Were Washington Boulevard to be the fronting street, right? Were it to be a Washington Boulevard address and not a Vernon Street address, and were that to be the side yard instead of the backyard, what is the setback as proposed versus the departure? And I ask because it seems to me that it seems to me appropriate. I'm just trying to get my head around what exactly is being asked in terms of what it would be. But my initial, and pardon me, I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm just trying to understand the question as I'm asking it, as it's coming out of my mouth. My initial, when I'm looking at it, I think of lot B as the side yard, and so the question that I was asking in my own head. And I'm glad that Commissioner Bagley brought this up because I felt a little too embarrassed to. But the question in my own head was, if this is a side yard, what is the setback now and what would it have to be were it a side yard? If there's an answer to that, I would be grateful for it.
I guess the one question I have, are you asking as if it was built as one house, or is it because I think that's a little bit different too.
Oh, that, okay.
So I get, so right now there's two lots. So lot A is considered a corner lot because obviously it has the two frontages. So you have two fronts and then you have two sides. You don't have a side because it's a duplex. It's attached, right? So, so basically, right, you have two fronts and a side, and then lot B has the front, the rear, and the side. Now, if this was a single family home, if that's maybe the thought of the comparison, you would have two fronts and two side yards. So no matter how you developed it, the frontages on the Vernon and Washington would be 25 feet if it was any type of really home development. It's really how the other property lines are looked at. If it was a single family home, it would be 8 and 10 would be the two side yard setbacks. So it would be 25, 25, 8, and 10. And here we have, I can have the exact numbers here. We have about 13 feet, 13 and a half feet on Washington, but in the rear there, behind adjacent to it, we have 19 feet. And if it was just so we know, if it was like a single family home, that could be as little as 8 up there, where we have 19 where the driveway is.
Right.
I don't know if I'm answering your question, maybe.
I'm at this point, I'm sort of kicking a dead horse, but I'm just trying to get my head around, like, were this treated as one lot and a single family home put on it, and given its proximity to Metro, the person who could afford this land could afford one of these lots could absolutely afford both of them and to put a single family home on them. I'm just trying to think, what would the maximum footprint look like? And I'm still fairly convinced by my first comment that we could see almost this exact same footprint, just maybe moved around a little bit on the lot. But for what it's worth, I actually think that this is very appropriately done, and that the building is closer to Washington Boulevard than it is to Vernon Street because of the character of Washington Boulevard, and as I think it was Mr. Braswell who was saying earlier, what's across the street from it, what's nearby it, what it's facing, that just, it feels like it fits there better given how it's laid out. But like I said, I'm just trying to imagine what numbers I would expect to see if there were some distance lines there. I'm going to stop hogging up the oxygen. Thanks.
Commissioner Bagley?
Yeah, we were kind of getting to a question, and again, I'm not the expert on by right or, I'm just not sure that the argument that is, if somebody wanted to just plop a house here, that they wouldn't have to still go through zoning changes with setbacks that are different. Like one house, if we're on the corner, again, so 25 feet, we're not 25 feet here from Washington Boulevard from what I can see, or am I just looking at this as drawing incorrectly?
It's about 13 and a half feet from Washington Boulevard.
Yes. Okay. So all right. So yeah. All right. All right. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from the commissioners? All right, let's move on to parking and transportation. Are there any questions from the Planning Commission on parking and transportation? Chair Lantemi?
Yeah, I'm looking, first of all, I want to say I fully agree with the technically one car per lot for this. I have no problem with it being lower than the required 2 per per lot. It is close enough to Metro. There's robust bus service here. Technically, you could probably get a second small car in there anyway. So I'm fully in favor of the legally reduced parking ratio because it's a practical matter. You could probably fit more in there anyway. I'm really more interested in the sidewalk issue, which was, of course, raised by the Boston Virginia Square Civic Association. It is a very narrow sidewalk, but I'm not in favor of moving around the building on the lot or changing the setbacks in order to widen the sidewalk. I think that's a Band-Aid approach rather than something we need to be looking larger and farther. And this came up, actually, if you bear with me, when we had the special club study for Washington and Kirkwood, which was way down the street there, and talked about the width of the sidewalks there. The Washington Boulevard right-of-way is very, very narrow. Even if we widen this sidewalk, it's only in front of this one house. We have multiple small lots going up and down Washington Boulevard on both sides. None of them are going to be, the majority of them are not going to be redone in our lifetime. We will never get a wide sidewalk going from Glebe Road to Kirkwood. It's never going to happen. What we need to do is look at Washington Boulevard itself. There are 4 travel lanes in a very narrow right-of-way. At this point, there's no reason for that any longer. The way this area has urbanized, we need to be looking at having it reduced to 3 lanes, which are 2 travel lanes, 1 turn lane, and devote that other lane to widen sidewalks and maybe even some bike lanes. But we have too many travel lanes along here. We have I-66, which is just a block away, which can take a lot of that overflow traffic. Traffic can be shifted down to wide Fairfax Drive. Washington Boulevard needs to be narrow the way it is west of I-66. There is no reason at this point in this urban environment to have 4 traffic lanes where we have such narrow, unsafe sidewalks, where it is a sidewalk that affirmatively discourages people from walking on it. It feels very unsafe as cars, trucks, buses whiz by literally inches from where you're walking. I think that at this point, DES really needs to be looking at narrowing the number of travel lanes, and that's how we solve this problem, not by eating into the lots that are lining Washington Boulevard. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bagley?
Yeah, I do want, as somebody who lives in not too far from this particular site and has up until more recent years done her daily walk on Washington Boulevard, but because I'd like to live through my walk, have stopped doing that. And I know there's nothing that the applicant can do about that at this point, or the staff or any of us. However, I think we really do need to be thinking about this and how, and especially for the Civic Association weighing in, what can we do? What is the means for everyone to go forward with looking at this? In the olden days, that road was not that wide, and it's been widened. And unfortunately, as it has been, speeds approach 50 some miles an hour. It's just very, very dangerous, and those sidewalks are way too spooky. Getting back to the parking, I did have a question on that. Where do guests park? I did notice in the community feedback that there were questions about parking that was on-street parking that was somewhat difficult, and that is sort of a limited little area in there. And of course, if you go across the street, if you can make it across the street, that's very difficult to park over there. So where do guests park is my question.
This is Olivia Sontag. So to answer your question, the applicant is not going to be eligible for the permit parking program. Right now, they're providing 2 oversized garages. We recognize there is room for, a tandem parking spot, probably for Lot B, and possibly some room in front of the garage areas. We do have with us our DES planner, Jane Kim. If you have any additional input, or the applicant can feel free to jump in on this one as well.
Hi, this is Jane Kim. I think that we are supportive of the reduced parking ratio, but I'm also interested in hearing what the applicant has to say about their visitor parking.
Hi, this is Charles Warren. With the applicant and the architect with the applicant. I think, you know, really we just have an oversized driveway, and we'll need to be friendly and do a tandem parking there. I don't think there's anywhere else to accommodate it on site practically.
Are there any other questions from commission members, CRC members, on the issue of parking and transportation? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to architecture and materials. I'll start with planning commission members. Any questions on the architecture and materials of this particular project? Commissioner Bagley?
While I think it's nice to have a duplex there, I just find the design very incongruous with the neighborhood, not just on that corner, but across the street, around the area, which tends to go a little bit more traditional. I also wonder about the flat roof. Everyone's allowed to go up to 35 feet. Normally, though, that's the peak. You got, sides coming down. I'm guessing that's, economic, but with a flat roof, can there be a green roof? I know that was brought up by one of the, I think David Howell's comments in the community feedback. So I would just, again, it's very incongruous to me, the design the way it is right now.
Did the applicant want to respond to that?
Charles, do you want to speak to the flat roof issue and the infrastructure for the solar array up there? And I know that you had looked into the comment about the green building, the green roof as well.
Sure. Yeah, at this point we're proposing a high reflective roof, a white roof, so it's a high reflectivity that will keep the solar heat gain down. And then the flat roof, really the intention of the flat roof is to give us larger area for solar panels. So that's really the intent there. We did look at using a green roof, but I think we're not quite ready to commit to that. I think there's some added expense for doing green roofs and also maintenance issues. We'd need to have access panels at the top to get up there and maintain it properly. So for like a single family house, it's a lot of maintenance to put on the end users.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson?
Yes, thanks. I noted in the most recent presentation, the applicant mentioned the high performance building systems, including HVAC heat pump, and that's great. I'm curious, so it sounds like the heating and ventilation are electric. What about the domestic hot water and or cooking? Will that also be electric? Ideally, to meet the goals of Arlington County's clean energy, community energy plan, the goal of carbon neutrality. We are pushing for as low carbon as possible, and electric can help produce that over time. So I'm curious if all systems are in fact electric.
We're exploring that at the moment. Right now, we're not quite there with all electric. I think we're continuing to work with our sustainability consultant on that one. I think the trade-off with going all electric, it usually means that you have a heavier electric demand. So there is some balance to that trade-off that we're continuing to explore.
Okay, I just encourage you to continue to work with your sustainability consultant on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So any further comment, Commissioner Bagley?
Yeah, thank you. So I went to the tax records and I see that this house dates back to 1920, making it 101 years old. So is there anything in that house, material-wise, that can be, instead of just put in a big trash pile and carried off to landfill, is there any part of that that could be repurposed by any organization, or I just would like to see something planetarily responsible done? And if this hasn't gone through historic or anything, is there anything in there possibly worth saving or giving to somebody, given that the house is 101 years old? Thank you.
Mr. Warren, did you want to address that?
Yeah, sure. I think we're looking at some donation companies that might help with the demo and the raise to see if there's anything of salvageable quality coming out of it. I think Michoud and Tony are on the call, and they can speak to that. And I know we've talked to them about it and brought it up, and I think they're looking into it.
Thank you.
Yes, I just wish the development team. We are actually, before every one of our projects, we always do contact Second Chance, and they basically come in and whatever is salvageable on their end, they do take with them. We do work with some other partners who actually come in and take items and take them and repurpose them as well. So that is something that we do.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, is your hand just kind of held over there from the last comment, or did you have something else?
Sorry, I'm taking it out.
No problem, no problem. Mr. Braswell?
Yes, ma'am. This question really hit home because I have been involved as a volunteer, with groups called Community Forklift, Rebuilding Together, and several others. And it's not just applicable to this old tearing down home, but to any home that we are going to take down to build bigger and quote unquote better. We in Arlington need to work better together with our developers to use the available resources that we have in the area to take a home down and preserve as many of the resources as possible. And I would urge CPHD and others to get this information out to our builders and to our homeowners.
Thank you, Mr. Braswell. Any other comments on this particular issue around architecture and materials? Okay. One, I guess we spoke about sidewalks earlier when we were talking about parking and transportation. Are there any other comments from the planning commissioners or the SPRC members on sidewalks that has not already been addressed? Okay, seeing none, I think that the final area for discussion is visitability elements. So whether we can increase the inventory of livable homes that support aging in place and accommodate mobility disability, excuse me. Ms. Ciotti, if you'd like to raise your comment or say your comment. I don't know if you're on mute because we can't hear you. Ms. Ciotti? Rosemary?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I never know this is going to happen. So thank you for the opportunity. Sorry for that, losing those few seconds. We're talking a lot about the missing middle. and we historically have not looked at the interior of our homes. Planning Commission, and we've mostly been the built setbacks and sidewalks and things like that. But what we've known for a while is that people are not able to age in place when that is what we know through surveys. That's what people want. But houses are not built to accommodate people's changing needs. And to change it after it's built is very expensive. And finally, with the conversation of missing middle and a more inclusive environment, we're getting back to talking about very simple things that we can do that help everybody. If you have a kid who busts up their knees playing soccer and has to stay on the first floor on crutches for a while, a lot of the new homes that are being built, there's no bathroom on that first floor. They're putting pocket bathrooms in on the stairwell and things. I've seen all kinds of architectural drawings that really make no sense in accommodating how people really live through the lifespan. So there's 3 simple things to qualify for visitability. And that's 1-0 threshold entrance, can easily be through the garage. It's 32-inch doors in the first floor, and a powder room or bathroom that is large enough to get in and close the door with a wheelchair. We're not talking McDonald's bathrooms. We're not talking fair housing, ADA. We're talking the minimum that has been decided as visitability. And this is also being embraced by Virginia Housing Authority. And there was a big webinar last week by Lee Highway Association, along with housing advocates. And this is a perfect time when we're doing a tear down and rebuilding to build back better, build back a home that will be with us for a long time and really will support people through all the ups and downs of life in a physical way. We don't have building criteria for single family homes. Might get there someday, but we could do better than we're doing now. Many people wind up in nursing homes because they break a hip and they can't, there's no bathroom on the first floor. They can't, there is no way. And so it's not the person with the broken hip that's the problem, it's the built environment. And that's all I wanted to say. And I hope we could have this conversation and make a difference here.
Did we want to hear from the applicant on the visitability issues that Ms. Ciotti has just raised with regard to those 3 particular issues? The entrance 32-inch doors and the accessibility of the powder room on the first floor.
Sure, thank you. We really appreciate that comment, and it's something we definitely take to heart. A lot of my day job is doing aging in place in single family homes, so I'm very familiar with the topic. In this particular house, I think it's, or these duplexes, I think we do have options for the garage entry. Certainly on the western lot is a little bit more friendly for having a 0 threshold entry, both in the garage and potentially at the porch on the left side. And as a rule, we typically put in larger doors in most of these projects and a little more generous powder room, which is available on this one. It's not quite big enough to get a whole primary suite down there or secondary suite down there, but we are making some accommodations to that. They're already in there. So we really appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you think that you'd be willing to go as far as reinforcing the wall there if they have to put grab bars?
Absolutely. That's one thing that we typically do is, I mean, it's a little bit further along than we are at this point, but we typically will spec putting blocking in walls for grab bars.
My next question is, will you actually put this in words in the final plan?
I think I need to talk to my boss. But,
I would love for you to get back to me. So, because
sure, yeah,
there's really no way of us tracking the inventory in Arlington if we don't have it in writing in the final plans.
Sure.
It's not so much as a housing for inspection purposes, but it is a way of us having a way of saying, are we even making any progress?
Sure.
So
yeah,
you can
let me talk with Matt and the development team, and we'll see
Yeah.
what we can do.
Yeah, we'll follow up with more information. Sure.
Thank you so very much.
No, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it.
Commissioner Bagley and then Mr. Braswell.
Yeah, I just want to associate myself with Commissioner Ciotti's comments and appreciate that the applicant will do as much as possible to try to meet the things that she's just discussed. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Braswell?
Yes, ma'am. I just wish that the Arlington County government and all Arlington would be listening to what Ms. Ciotti said tonight. And I would really like to stand with her and say, you're right on, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, any further comment from any commissioner or SPRC member? Mr. Braswell, you have your hand up, but I assume you don't have any further comment. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for public comment. At this point, we have two speakers so far, Mr. Painter, and then after Mr. Painter, Ms. Giacomini. And so each public comment has a 2-minute time period. Actually, I think before we go there, Mr. There's one, Nicholas. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I apologize. So, Mr. Painter?
Yes. Hi. Thank you. My name is Randy Painter. I'm on the Ballston, Virginia Square Civic Association Executive Committee, member at large, and we submitted a letter by email to you today expressing some of our concerns with the project, many of which were already discussed during the meeting. It primarily relates to the narrow sidewalk between the project and Washington Boulevard, which, as also was discussed, is an issue along Washington Boulevard all the way from Glebe to Kirkwood. As some of you know, there's barely enough space to walk on the sidewalk, particularly if you have two people walking in opposite directions trying to pass each other, which has been particularly an issue during the pandemic as you're trying to avoid people as you walk outside. And pedestrians are precariously close to the traffic, as noted in the letter, as well as the materials for tonight's meeting. The master transportation plan actually calls for this section of the roadway to have a 4 to 6 foot green strip between the sidewalk and the road, and it does not have that. Some greater concerns also related to how the renderings show that there would be a fence on the other side of the sidewalk, which if you're walking and there's a fence right up against the sidewalk, it's even harder to get extra space to avoid other people. So, and in addition, the fence causes some visibility issues, particularly when you're trying to come up to the corner and when there's traffic coming by. So, and there's also the issue of it makes it look like there's you can safely bike there, which you can't really do that either. So we hope that you will take all of our comments into consideration as you review this project. And thanks so much for all of your time.
Thank you. Ms. Giacomini?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and I thank the applicant and the staff for their comments and work on this. I hadn't planned on speaking, but I decided I would when, Commissioner Weir, I was interested in the notion that this particular structure could have just been, if it were a single family house, built by right. And I think through the discussion, we've found that actually that's not the case, because they were asking for adjustments to the required setback of 25 feet and established that on a corner lot, each street frontage has a setback of 25 feet and the other 2 yards are 8 and 10. haven't remembered what the footprint of this is like and what the coverage is like, but it probably would have at least had to have gone to BZA if it were a single family home. And just so folks know, in this particular neighborhood, a street and a half away at the corner of 13th and Utah, a similarly sized corner lot just had a request for setbacks denied by the BZA. So, you know, it is a placement and how things fit into a neighborhood is a sensitive subject. You know, there are a lot of mixed housing types in these particular blocks. A duplex is completely appropriate here. There's a house of this same vintage that's 2 blocks over on Utah, and it actually is a 2-family, has developed into a 2-family house over the years. So all of that is fine. It's just, I think we need to, as we go forward, be thinking that when there's a request to change from what is definitely in the zoning code, we either do site plan or it's going to have to go to BZA to some public process. As far as the trees go, you know, that's something else that sometimes in by right, we do work out doing tree preservation zones with private developers. The sad part about that is that once the development is built and then sold, the tree preservation area and plan no longer carries with it. So the good thing about a site plan is, at least with the tree planting that's required in the site plan, we know that it will remain on site. While there's some plantings that are required by Chess Bay with single family by right, it wouldn't probably be as good as what we might get here with this site plan. I'm in no way suggesting we need to do site plans for single family. I'm just saying that there can be a balance, and I can understand why this particular area, this particular project is site plan. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I live in Clarendon, although I just walked by this place earlier this evening, and I agree that we need a wider sidewalk there. I think it's important to kind of take that space out of the road rather than waiting literally forever until every one of these lots redevelops in a way that requires a site plan. I think bigger picture. I wish we weren't here tonight doing this. I think that, like, even setting aside the question of whether exactly this footprint could have been built by right as a single family house, there is no good policy reason that either a single family home or a duplex or a 4-plex or a 6-plex with a footprint like this shouldn't be allowed by right on a parcel like this. And, you know, I mean, I like a couple of weeks ago, I was in an LRPC meeting trying to help make the case for a GLUP study for a big for residential next to the Whole Foods, and I think the sense in that meeting was like there might not be planning resources and stuff to like figure out whether that's a good idea. But like in cases like that, there's a lot of scope for potential community benefits and for everything else. And like those are the kinds of things we should be spending our time on, not these things that should be by right everywhere in America and certainly everywhere in the county and certainly in Boston, walking distance from the metro. So yeah, we need to figure out a way to do these by right everywhere.
Thank you. Mr. Nicholas Glissas?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
I'm sorry if I mispronounced your
know
name.
Ms. Thompson from a former life, so it's nice to see you, Carrie. I'm one of the co-writers of the letter, but I'm speaking on my own behalf. I'm a neighbor. I live on North Stafford Street, and I walk around this neighborhood quite a bit because of COVID. This particular area the sidewalk is way too small. And one of the problems is, unfortunately, for tree lovers, is that some of the trees are too much in the way. And if you take a close look at the sidewalk down this entire stretch from Stafford to Vernon, you'll see that there's a lot of overgrown trees, bushes, and things that just even, grow right over the sidewalk, taking up valuable space. This sidewalk should be at least 2 feet wider. There is precedent for widening the sidewalk too. If you look at 4210 Washington Boulevard, which was not built by right by any means. It was an old greenhouse, and now it's, I guess it's a duplex. The sidewalk was widened by 1 foot. I think it's not enough though. It should be by 2 feet. Just about trees and sidewalks, I think the sidewalk wins over the trees. And I know we like to preserve trees, but I have personal experience with trees falling on my house, causing thousands of dollars worth of damage. And the soil in this area is just horrible for doing that. Regarding Washington Boulevard and, don't widen the sidewalk, just do something to Washington Boulevard, that doesn't work. This would be a transition area where lanes would have to narrow down to 1. So I don't buy that argument at all. I think that the planning people of this of Arlington made a big mistake in not taking a better look at the stretch of Washington Boulevard between Kirkwood and Lincoln. That is a different story. But any changes to the boulevard should be done in a comprehensive manner. That's about it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so I think
we have one last comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Jane Green.
Hi, can you hear me? No? Wait, can you hear me?
We can now.
No?
Yes.
Yes, okay, sorry. Sorry, I was late joining. We had bedtime here. Jane Green, and I want to largely echo Mr. Stevenson's comments. I would love to hear, how much cost has been added to this project, the potential sales price of these units because of this process that's pushing, something that could be a more attainable housing to the higher end of the spectrum because of this process. I think if you look at the location, maybe the immediate neighbors are single family homes, but across the street, duplex or row house community, townhouse community. This is a very, there's significant transportation access. The idea that this has to go through a very heavily scrutinized process is going to add to costs, and that means that the homeowners here, will have to pay more. And that makes it a smaller selection of people who will have the opportunity to own what looks like very lovely building here in this great location. So, just for better policy overall, if we can think about what, we like to have our hands in things, people who show up for meetings, we like to make changes, but what is the real benefit of that versus the cost that this is going to be borne further down the road?
Thank you. Okay, so I believe that is, I believe Ms. Green was our last public speaker. So this is the time when I wrap things up for us so that we can close out this SPRC meeting for Vernon Street Duplex project. I want to thank you all for being here today and for speaking with us specifically on this project and addressing the issues regarding the building placement and setbacks, the landscape plan and tree preservation issues, parking and transportation, architecture and materials, visitability elements, as well as the sidewalk, the increase with the sidewalk. I think we heard a lot of comments today about whether we should even be in this type of process or whether this could be standardized, and these types of issues could be standardized in either the zoning ordinance or other places, so that there could so that we are not realizing more costs and benefit when looking at these specific types of issues. There's some discussion around what we can do with regard to addressing the safety risks and kind of mutual use of the sidewalk with pedestrians and bicyclists, and then the it being adjacent to or very close, I guess, when you're using the sidewalk with the cars that are barreling down the road. I think somebody used that word. And there was comments on whether we should be looking at narrowing Washington Boulevard or bringing in DES to start looking at that particular issue. There's some concerns around parking at this particular location. It seems that there is not a plan other than using the existing parking lane, the driveway, for overnight visitors. And that may be an area where the applicant can provide more comment or could that, excuse me, further at the Planning Commission meeting. There was some question about whether this particular project was incongruous in terms of its look with regard to the characteristics of other homes in this neighborhood and beyond. There also was some great discussion on livability and visitability elements within the infrastructure of the home, and we will await to hear from the applicant on whether that could be included in the final plan for us to be able to track with regard to inventory on a going forward basis. Thank you all so much for your conversation this evening. Thank you for spending this time here and providing your comment and your insight. Of course, this matter will go before the Planning Commission. Ms. Sontag? In April?
In May.
In May. Oh, that's right, because we're in April almost. Okay, in May. And so we look forward to hearing from you again at that point. And if there are any updates, we will, of course, update the website. So I think that's it. Is that right, Ms. Sontag?
Yes, that's everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for having us. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.